I am your host, Nicole Will, and we thank you for joining us as we navigate the world with your aging loved one. We are here to come alongside elders, family members, and the senior living community as we explore the world of aging and elder care with helpful resources, informative interviews, and approachable conversations. We get to do this together, so join us on our journey, and this is the willGather podcast. After Lucinda received her father's diagnosis, so many questions came. Who can I call? What's next? Who will support me? There are millions of unpaid family caregivers, and millennials make up roughly 1/3 of multi-generational family caregivers. As a young caregiver, there's a deep need to feel heard and supported. Lucinda Koza is the founder and CEO of iAlly, and out of her frustration came creation. Lucinda found that there is a lack of support and resources, and that fueled her to create iAlly. This is a community-driven app that saves millennial family caregivers time, reduces stress, and enables informed decision-making by providing services that fulfill their unique needs. I've always enjoyed each and every interview that I've done, but this one was so impactful for me. Lucinda is real and raw and vulnerable and brave and honest, and I believe is making a huge difference in making change for unpaid family caregivers. Here's my interview with Lucinda.
It's so basically, my parents got divorced when I was like 12, and I have a brother and a sister, but we all sort of have varying degrees of relationships with both of our parents, which I think a lot of millennials probably completely relate to. And my dad was remarried at the time, and my mom was just getting remarried, and he had started acting really bizarre, and he is also an alcoholic. So his wife at the time basically shared with me that he was, having a really awful alcohol problem, which was totally true. But I could see other symptoms of something much more sinister. And I think they were just being masked by the drinking, like, him being confused and saying things that didn't make sense, and, falling, losing his balance. I mean, slurred speech, all of that stuff is like also, I guess, easily dismissed as like the behavior of a drunk person. Although now I feel like how could she have missed that something else was really wrong? So of course one day I was just like, I can't take this anymore. Like I have to take charge of this situation, and I have to like almost take ownership of my father, because he can't help himself, and the people that are supposed to be,
Hi, Lucinda. Thank you for joining me. And we finally get to connect, and I'm so happy that we're able to do that today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to talk with you and be here.
Say thank you. Same. I was like counting the days. I'm like, this is gonna happen. I'm so happy. You became your father's caregiver at a really young age. Can you tell us your story? How did you get to that place where you were in that position?
Myself, you can't listen to anything he says right now. This is just something's going on. He's had a stroke, he's something. So of course, he had had several strokes. And at that point, since he hadn't gotten any medical attention in like a timely manner, he had pretty extensive brain damage. And he, couldn't say who the president was, all of that. He had vascular dementia. He had aphasia, so he knew what he wanted to say but couldn't find the words. And when I was there with him at the hospital, I thought like, okay, I got him here. Now everyone else is going to swoop in and sort of like join this party. And I was completely wrong. And no one showed up to help me, including my brother and my sister and, even my mom. Even though they're divorced, I still was like, Mom, you're my mom. Like, you don't leave me like alone to deal with this. I was just so terrified and overwhelmed, and I had to just take over. I became power of attorney, healthcare proxy. I had to become the person in charge of his finances and all the legal and medical decisions, and which was good because his wife at the time was needed to not have that power. But I had no idea what I was doing. I was so young and I was alone, and I just felt invisible. Like, why aren't any of these nurses like looking at me and saying like, are you okay? Like, hi, child, like, alone. Have you eaten? Like, is there someone that I can call? I don't know. I mean, this is all pre-COVID, but I don't know. They must have been so busy. And of course, I know, I don't blame nurses or doctors or anything like that, but it just sucks. The whole thing kind of sucks. And I was just so shocked at the lack of support and the lack of like anyone at all sort of checking on me. And so that's how I became his primary caregiver.
Well, you stepped in, like you said, as that daughter. You knew it was the right thing that you needed to do, but it's so hard. And I think realistically, like you were saying about the nurses and the doctors, it's like we know that they're busy, but the humanity side of us wants to have people support people. And when it doesn't happen and when you feel so alone, it feels, like you said, it's traumatizing in a way, just to feel that helpless too. A lot of adults don't even know, like older adults have a really hard time even understanding how to get power of attorney and manage legal decisions and financial decisions. They're struggling with, what do I do? How do I do that? Let alone when you are younger and you're still figuring out other things, right? I mean, we are to be put in that situation, and where do you begin? And being alone and being younger, and I'm sorry, that's so tough.
Yeah. It was like experiencing it, and then also like floating above my body and looking at myself and thinking, I can't believe this is happening to this girl, this poor child. I don't know, I felt like such a child. And I mean, it felt like a nightmare. Like, someone wake me up. I mean, I never ever thought I would be in such a situation by myself.
It really speaks to that people really need that community and can't and shouldn't have to do all of that alone. And when you talk about that little girl and looking down and having that trauma, like how did you move from that girl into creating a powerful movement of supporting other millennial caregivers?
It's like I shed my skin. It was like it was a point of no return. I was never going to be that same girl that I was before. And this, I guess this sounds trite, but I lost my innocence. Like any last bit of like, you know, everything's gonna be great, everything's gonna be okay.
It's gonna work out, it's
Like
fine.
all of that
Yeah.
was just gone. And there's no way. I mean, I felt like, how is it that I am the strongest person that I know? Like, I remember feeling like everyone had failed me, like every single, quote unquote adult. And I just, there was no turning back. I was never gonna unknow what I now knew. And so in that way, it was sort of all I could do was like, it was like a crucible that, once I had passed through it, it's like all I could do was tell my story and tell people what happened. And because it always felt like, people, no one's going to believe me. Like, all I can do is just reach out and scream and shout and then I realized, oh my God, this has to be happening to other young women, was my first thought. Like, this has to be. And of course then I did research and found that there are millions of unpaid family caregivers, and millennials especially. And I just thought, oh my God, we're not talking about this. And it's such a disservice to others and to ourselves and to our society to not talk about this and prepare our children for the fact that this is going to happen someday. And so I thought, God, this is like my, if I do one thing in my life, it has to be telling this story and trying to make sure that no other, lost young person, goes through this feeling so alone and like just desperate. I just don't want anyone to feel that way. And I know that I can't accomplish that, but that's how it happened.
Yes, but I feel that you are starting to, I know everyone is a really big ask, but you are making such a difference in sharing your story and creating this movement of let's talk about it. And what I really valued in your story was your realness and your authenticity and your willingness to just be raw. I've read some articles that you've written, and I think that's the problem now is people they're not that honest about what's really going on for them. And like you
Yes.
said, not being that raw and honest is doing a disservice for other people, because then they're feeling like, oh my gosh, I feel so alone and overwhelmed. Should I not be feeling this way? No one else is talking about this. Am I supposed to have it all together and pretend like everything's fine when it's not fine? You know?
Yes.
So I think that is where I see this movement that is happening, and I'm also in agreement. Like, I want to talk about it. I'm getting to the point where I'm like mad. I'm mad that there are like why are there unpaid family caregivers? Why can't we address this situation? Do we need to do it at a, obviously like a policy level or lobbying? I mean, that's like a whole nother podcast, but
Yeah.
you took what the only way through those feelings and emotions was to create. Like, I'm going to create, and I'm going to create positive change, and I'm going to create a movement, because it's taking all of that energy and channeling it into something that's powerful and important for sure.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Like, it really was channeling all of that anger, which of course I know there's so much, there's so many layers.
Yeah.
It's not just anger.
Right.
But betrayal, I don't know. It was just deep, like, fuck you energy.
Yes. Nope, we're good. Yeah.
I just,
so
it was
true.
taking all of that energy and channeling it into, I gotta get, all of us together to tell our stories.
Yeah, I agree. For people listening, when we're talking about what you've created in this movement, can you tell us about iAlly? And then we'll get into all of these other things that we want to talk about. But what is it? How does it work? What is your mission?
Yes, so iAlly is a app. It's a community-driven app. So there's the community is such an important part, so that there's peer support and asking for help, offering help, and just not being isolated, and knowing that you're not the only person going through this. And so in addition to that, there are basically all of these forms of help and resources and experts. So there are coaches, and there's financial coaching, which is a really big thing, because obviously, as you know, like, when you're at this age, you're just trying to figure out how to handle your own finances, and then to add on like a parent's finances, it's just so much responsibility. And there's also legal counsel, and there's all of these partnerships, like discounts on, products for home health, basically anything and everything that can make the family caregiver's life and responsibility easier, so that they can still enjoy their life and live a happy, healthy, fulfilling life, where they still get to do what they want to do, and their life doesn't have to be derailed by this caregiving experience. They can happen at the same time. And they really can. I really believe that, but it takes community. It takes like everyone being, on that train with you. Like, yes, you can be a caregiver as a young person and be okay.
I think a lot of times people want to put people in different camps, right? Like I'm just going to start talking. Like you're overwhelmed and this is stressful, or you're a happy, healthy caregiver.
Yeah,
And I
right.
think what the reality is like you were saying, you are still going to experience those hardships and feeling alone and also feel supported and feel joy. And so how do we find that balance of that it can live together? Those emotions can live together.
Yes, that is exactly right. That is exactly what we need as human beings. We need to almost have permission, give ourselves permission to feel two conflicting ways, seemingly conflicting ways at once. Like, you're so right about some days I'll look at the, person on Instagram who projects the happy caregiver thing. And some days I look at it and I'm like, oh, that's lovely. And then maybe the next day I'll look at that content and I'll feel like, well, God, like what's wrong with me that I'm not the happy, healthy, got it all figured out, like Mary Poppins or something. That's not human to just be like, you've got to be, sunshine and rainbows about this all the time or you're failing.
So many different facets of our emotions, right? Like all the time. And like you said it so perfectly, having the permission to know that it's normal to feel them all, maybe all at the same time. Or one of my really good friends, when we talk, she'll ask me, how are you doing right now or today? And understanding that that could change in 2 hours, it could change tomorrow, and having the space that I'm not tied to those emotions that I felt an hour ago. Like we can evolve and change, and I can be happy 1 minute, sad the next minute, and having people around you that allow you the ability to experience those emotions and hold space for you to feel safe in it is so important, especially as a caregiver when it's a roller coaster every day.
Yes, God, that is so true. And that's why it can be so sort of dangerous for a young person if they are alone doing it, because they don't have that person that is sort of guiding them in a healthy way.
Right.
So, yeah, that's so true. We need those people that don't hold us to, well, why did you let your dad move in if you hate him?
Yeah. Or you're having a hard time. Yeah.
It's like, look, I made that decision because it was the right decision. But that doesn't mean that I don't feel icky right now.
I love that you have all these different types of support systems. I think legal is so important. I mean, medical, financial, like you said, all of those are those major decisions that young people have to step in and figure out all of a sudden without having any knowledge of doing it before. It's so helpful, and it's another way, right, of building out that support system. And the cost of caregiving is so high, and there's not this, I would say, easy plug and play of here's how family caregivers get paid. There's not an easy answer, and it varies based on state and location and so many different factors. What are your thoughts on that? Are you finding that we're getting closer to addressing how that can help people? As a young person, especially, we're just starting out our careers. We're wanting to grow our finances. We're in a place of, those are the years where we're trying to make some moves. And when that is stunted, it's so challenging.
Yes. I think we are, as a society, we are more open because of the pandemic. I think we're more open to having that conversation. I remember, I set up Google alerts, about, caregiver and finance and whatever. And when I first set them up, it was like I never got any hits. But now, every day, there are articles being written calling attention to this situation. And I think the most important thing is for a caregiver, especially a young caregiver, the most important thing is to know what's available to you. And of course we don't know it all. And so we could be paying for something that actually the insurance would have covered, or we could be driving way too far to see a provider that, we could go to one much closer. We're taught to just blindly trust these sort of authority figures. And since it does vary, state to state and with insurance and this and that, it's important to try to teach this or instill these set of tools to always be, and it's exhausting.
It takes so much energy and time.
To always be, figuring out what can you get, what do you deserve, what is owed to you, because this is hard.
Yeah. It is. It's so much time and energy when you think about the hours on the phone or researching online. You want to not blindly take everything as face value, but know that you're that you're spending your time and your resources wisely. That feels good to be able to do that.
Yes, because we don't have endless time or resources. So yes, you're absolutely right. That is the best way I've heard it said. It just feels so much better to know that you're working smarter, not harder.
Right. Yeah, I think sometimes too, let me know if you felt like this, where because I'm on the younger side, I'm right on the cusp. I'm Gen X and millennial, and then I'm a woman, right? That's my own stuff, but I sometimes feel like I'm being taken advantage of, and that just makes me so mad because no one wants to feel that way. So I think there's an element of that too, where it's we're learning, we're researching, we're growing. I want to feel like I am not getting taken advantage of, especially when we've never done something before. So that's a big piece of it too.
Yep, I completely agree. I feel that as a woman, I feel that as a caregiver, and then combined, it's like I'm just invisible, and that's why I've had to scream so much. I just had to be like, I had to grow like the thickest skin. But that doesn't mean I don't also feel very hurt, so it's,
so true. And at the same time, do you feel like you're also then dealing with the loss of the dad that you knew, the grief of life not looking how you thought it would, coming along with that?
Yeah. There are so many layers of grief. Like, there's anticipatory grief, which is, I know that my dad is gonna die at some point. And then there's also grieving him. He's completely different. He's completely different. I mean, his personality is just completely changed because of dementia. But then there are times, of course, where I'll see like a flash of it, and then I like scramble to hold on to that and like pull more out of him, which can kind of only make it even more devastating, because then I have to go through that acceptance thing all over again, where I'm like, oh yeah, like that's not happening anymore. It's like every day, and it's like grieving someone and then still seeing them physically is so bizarre, and it's a total mess with your head. Completely. And I feel like I've heard, and I completely understand this. I have a friend who, she cares for her mother, who has a mental illness, and my friend has said before, I kind of want her to die. And at that moment, I felt so like, that is so brave of you to admit, and healthy for you to admit. And it doesn't mean that you actually want her to die, but it means that, there's so much complication around
it's so
grief.
Layered. There's one thing I remember my mom saying after my grandma passed away, and you feel guilty when you can kind of take a deep breath after that death happens, because the caregiving load is so heavy. So you feel guilty that you feel the relief of that. And then there's like the shame will creep in, and you're like, I love this person. I'm not supposed to feel okay that this death has happened, yet I do. And then that feels weird. And it's all of it's exactly like you said, it's so layered. It's so complicated. And appreciating your friend's honesty and that you could just like hear her say that, because I think none of us feel like we can say those really things that we're thinking because of what people might think or how we'll be judged or all that goes into that. Because those are real. I mean, those are real thoughts that we do have periodically, depending on our situation, and everyone's journey is so different.
Yes. And we need to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, first of all, we need to be able to talk about end of life. We need to be able to plan for it and to help our loved one plan for it and help ourselves plan for it, but it's still so taboo, and that's a disservice, because I feel like if we were more able to talk about end of life, then we would probably be much more able to talk about grief.
Totally. That's the perfect word. It is a disservice to not have those conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're just going to have to do that at some point. If we're thinking of moving into a place of having more public recognition, and whether that's with hard conversations that really need to happen, or caregiving in general, social media as a whole another ball game. And it can be so great. I've connected with so many people on that platform of having the awareness of knowing that different things are out there and the recognition. And so I wanted to get your thought. Do you feel like there is that recognition, that public recognition of caregiving? I think with COVID, we've moved into that a little bit more. Or do we have a long ways to go? Are we not there? Are we not there yet?
I feel like we have come a super long way, maybe due to COVID. I mean, I remember one of the first sort of investors that I spoke to, he basically gaslit me. Like, he basically was like, that's not a problem. That's not something that happens in our society. And I was like, but I'm telling you that it does, and it did, and it is. And oh my God, I felt so much rage after that conversation. I was like, here's another, like, rich older man telling me that my experience is not real.
Right.
And I feel like no one would say that now. Or if they did, they would really be ignorant and really uninformed, because it has been, I mean, God, the pandemic, it's just, everyone has had to think about caregiving.
Yes.
And how do we take care of our vulnerable populations, and how do we help people have jobs and also take care of someone at the same time. And we have a president who is talking about it, and like talking about it a lot, which is so shocking in a wonderful way. And social media, all of the people who are, I think what's really brave is then I know that not everyone, I would never expect this of everyone, but the people who really show the reality on social media, I appreciate that, because that's very brave and vulnerable. So I think we've come a very, very long way in a short amount of time, but we definitely still have a long way to go.
We do.
And still the millennial piece, I think, I'm not sure we've come far in terms of people recognizing that even young people, even very young people, like children, are filling these caregiving roles. And that needs to be, that has got to be understood.
I would say too, especially right in the last year, think of all of the young children that were not in school and were home, and all of a sudden thrust into, they didn't know it, into caregiving roles. They probably just didn't have the language to know how to name what they were doing. And what that's going to look like in the next few years and the support that they might need and working through all of those emotions, I think is going to be huge. Do we have more millennial caregivers today, or have we always just had a large group of young caregivers, but we just didn't know it? And it wasn't talked about it because there wasn't the connectedness that we have now through our social media community.
Wow, that's such a, I never actually even thought about like, oh my God, wow, yes. That's how we know about it, is because we're connecting with each other now.
Yeah.
But so it's like both are true, because definitely the millennial generation is going to be hit very hard, and it's starting, but the boomer generation is huge and they're living longer, and there's no sort of infrastructure that matches, you know, how long they're living, and there's no plan.
Yeah.
There's no plan other than like family caregivers.
Right.
Which is the, you know, millennials are the children of boomers, and so we are going to be hit very hard, and especially, I mean, multi-generational. Millennials are more than 1/3 of the population of multi-generational caregivers.
Wow.
So it is growing.
Yes, it is. That's so true what you said. It is kind of both, because I do, if I have to like psychoanalyze this, family structures are so different than they were how many years ago. And while that's wonderful and things are evolving and changing, there is a lot of different family dynamics. And so stepping in, and then if we really look at that boomer population that is in that demographic that we're all, you know, not waiting to see. I think there is action to some degree, but we're not prepared for it. And I don't think we really, like you said, have a clear plan of what that's going to look like. And, you know, millennials are the children of that demographic that is coming, and so that is going to be a huge weight on the shoulders of your generation. It is.
Yes.
Yeah. And like you said, we are talking about it. We're aware of it more with being connected through technology in the last how many years. So it is. Yeah, I think you're right. It is kind of a combination of it was probably happening and we just didn't know as much, but it is, I feel like it is definitely more significant now than it was in the past, I feel like.
Yes, you said something that is so true. The family structures are just sort of all over the place, which is, you know, like my parents being divorced and the kids move far away.
Totally,
and
yeah.
So it's like,
yeah. And single parents
harder.
that are deciding to have children without a partner, or, you know, whatever those dynamics are, they're a little different they're different than they were 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Some people might say they don't really need that support, but I think we really all do. There's that power in, you talked about when people share their story and they're vulnerable. And I think when we share our story, it creates a place where we're not forgetting what we've been through, and we're able to hopefully provide a little community and insight. And I think documenting it lets us look back and remember. I had someone offer me really good advice for even being an entrepreneur and work, and you just get overwhelmed, or whether it's your caregiver. And they were like, write down even those like little successes or even the things that like you overcame. And I started to do that. And what it did was, so then when you're having those like really awful hard days, you can go back and be like, okay, I'm not a total failure. I had this good day, or this thing happened. And as in our caregiving journey, documenting those like successes or those really good days, I think help us and help others get through the hard time.
Yes. That is so that is so true, because like you forget all of the stuff you've done. Like someone asked me the other day about, they were trying to get their father who has vision impairment. They're trying to get their father to stop driving. And I thought, oh yeah, I did that. Like I went through that and it was awful and horrible, and I thought I was never going to solve that problem. But not only did I solve that problem, I don't even remember it now. And so thinking about that, I was like, I'm a badass. So you're totally right. Like I overcame what was an enormous obstacle. And now I'll never even think about it.
Yeah, that is a big thing to have to go through. That's like, I would say I hear from families that the driving is, I mean, one of the most major hurdles to cross. It is.
Yeah. But I guess I won't understand until I hopefully go through it myself.
Yeah.
Because I totally feel like, why is it such a big deal? Oh my God. Why can't you understand that you might hit someone and hurt them? But it was like taking away his independence, really, and like his dignity.
So much tied to it.
Yes.
Yeah. What do young caregivers need? How can others show up and support them?
They need advocates. They need people that are not just going to say, I'm sorry, or I'm praying for you. Not that praying is bad, but they need someone who's going to do something to help.
I think you posted a little bit ago, you were talking about how, like, what not to say, and it was along those lines of, let me know if you need anything, and I'm thinking of you. I agreed with that so completely. I had a situation where I had hurt my back really bad and was in bed for literally like 2 months.
Oh my God.
I got a lot of really nice messages like, hope you're doing better, let me know if you need anything. But there were a few people that just said, I'm dropping off a meal on this day at this time. Love you. And I'm going to the grocery store and I'm buying your groceries. I could so easily accept that, and it was such a mental load to carry when it was like, what do you need, or can I help? It's like, I don't even want to have to think about telling you what I might need, and then I'm feeling bad that I'm inconveniencing you because you just said it to be nice and you don't really.
Yes.
So I related to that, and I was like, oh my gosh, 100%. Yes, you just need people to show up with action and in love.
Yes.
And just start there. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It just like it could be the simplest thing or something that feels totally meaningless, but it's not meaningless to the person who needs help. And saying, let me know if you need anything, they're not going to ever let you know that they need something.
I agree.
So it's like a fart in the wind, you know? I wish everyone could just trust me, just know that they need something.
Yeah.
And they're not going to tell you, so just do something.
I love it. I agree. That can be our there's so many. There's like so many things that we'll take away from this conversation, but for sure, just to show up in action and do something and be an advocate's huge, so huge.
Yep.
Where can people learn more about you? How can they find out more about iAlly and to support you guys?
Well, I would love for anyone and everyone to go to iAlly.com. So it's I-Ally. And, you know, you don't have to be a caregiver to sign up and be part of the community, because the whole thing is that we need allies. And caregiving is going to affect all of us at some point. And so it's really a society issue. And I would love to talk to anyone, about this. And so of course we're on social media, Instagram, Twitter, just DM, slide into or jump into my DM.
I love it. That's perfect. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Me too. This was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I have to tell you about Jimmy Zolo and his new company, Joe and Bella. Our paths had crossed, and I'm so glad they did. It was such a pleasure to meet Jimmy. He is passionate about older adults. He told me that after both of his grandparents moved into a care community, his family's world was turned upside down, and they really became caregivers overnight. As you know, being a caregiver to someone close to you is often overwhelming. There's so much for you to manage, even with the support of a care community, like making sure your loved one has all of the products that they need and keeping them stocked when things run out, keeping inventory on what you have and what you don't. Jimmy also had that problem, and he was scrolling through all of these product reviews across the internet, and like most of us in the sandwich generation, we don't have enough hours in the day. It can feel really overwhelming and time-consuming and frustrating. We don't know what we're always looking for. And he wished there was a way to shop for his grandparents. Then the pandemic hit, preventing visitation to care communities, making this process even more difficult. So Jimmy decided to launch his own business to solve this problem. He founded Joe and Bella to make shopping for older adults simple. They carry everything from comfy clothes to creative gifts. They even have toiletries that can be automatically reordered and tech that makes caregiving easier. Everything all in one location. What I love, and I know you guys will love too, is that each and every product on Joe and Bella has been carefully selected by caregiving experts. Jimmy is so generous. He is giving an exclusive offer to our listeners of our podcast. You can use the promo code GATHER to receive 10% off your first purchase at joeandbella.com. That code is GATHER, GATHER, for 10% off at joeandbella.com. You don't want to miss this offer. Head to their website and check it out. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.